You ever feel like you're just going through the motions? Like life is a treadmill, and no matter how hard you run, you're not really getting anywhere? That was me, for a long time. I had this nagging feeling that I was always a step behind everyone else. Like the life I'd imagined for myself, the one I thought I'd have by now, had slipped through my fingers. I used to believe in all the cliches. That if you work hard enough, if you chase your dreams, eventually it all clicks. But somewhere along the way, that belief faded. At some point, you stop thinking things will get better, and you start accepting that maybe this is just how life is. You learn to cope with the reality that things don't always turn out the way you expect. I was comfortable in my disappointment. My belief bubble had popped. When I was younger, I had big dreams, dreams of success, of a perfect life, of being the kind of guy who had it all. I imagined a big house, a fast car, the kind of lifestyle you see in movies. But now, well, the house was a small apartment, the car was barely running. And the lifestyle I had, let's just say it wasn't exactly what I had envisioned. And let's talk about relationships, because they've always been a bit of a mess for me. Sure, I'd had a few serious relationships, even got married a couple of times, but none of it stuck. It always felt like I was trying to fit into some mold that didn't fit me. I was always told love was supposed to fix everything, that the right person would come along and make everything better. But that didn't happen either. I started wondering if I was just unlucky, or if maybe I just wasn't meant for any of that stuff. And then there's money. There was always this feeling of not having enough. Not enough to feel secure. Not enough to feel like I could stop working my fingers to the bone just to stay afloat. That was probably the worst part. You work hard, you save a little, but nothing ever seems to get you to the place where you can breathe easy. You never get to the point where you're financially free enough to just live. You're always chasing that next paycheck, always thinking, maybe next year I'll be set. Maybe this time it'll happen, but it didn't. I had started to wonder if it was all just a game, if people who made it just had something I didn't. Maybe they had the right connections, or the right timing, or maybe they were just lucky. I couldn't help but feel like I'd missed the boat somehow. It was a quiet kind of despair, a slow realization that maybe the future I dreamed of wasn't going to happen. I didn't even know if I wanted it anymore. At some point, you stop believing in your own potential. You stop seeing the point in chasing after something when it feels like you're just going to keep hitting walls. And that's exactly how I felt. Like I was up against a wall, trying to find a way out but not seeing any doors. I started to look at the people around me, my friends, colleagues, even strangers, and they all seemed so much further ahead. They had careers they were proud of, families, big houses, plans for the future. And me? I was just there. Stuck. Like I was playing catch-up with life, but the finish line kept moving further away. But somewhere, deep down, I still had this little voice inside that told me it wasn't too late. That maybe, just maybe, I could still turn things around. The problem was, I didn't know how. And I didn't know if I had the energy or the courage to make that leap. That was my life for years, stuck in a loop of disappointment and quiet hope. I was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't meant to have the things I wanted. But what if I was wrong? What if there was still a chance to break out of this cycle? What if there was a way to rebuild my life, to actually go after something I wanted and make it happen? And that's when I met her. Emma. She was everything I wasn't, but everything I thought I needed. And just like that, I started to believe again. I guess, deep down, I always believed that I could turn things around. You know, there's this part of you that holds on to hope, even when everything around you says it's probably too late. I didn't want to believe I was too old for a fresh start. I had dreams. Still do, I suppose. But somewhere along the line, I thought those dreams just weren't meant for me. I used to think that if I met the right person, things would finally click. A good relationship could be the missing piece, right? It's like the key that unlocks everything else. Financial success, happiness, confidence. It all just seemed like it would fall into place if I had the right partner by my side. But let's be honest, those kinds of relationships don't just happen. And in my case, they hadn't. My past was full of disappointments. A couple of marriages, a few serious relationships, none of them ever quite hitting the mark. I never knew how to balance everything: career, love, finances. It felt like I was constantly treading water, hoping someone would throw me a lifeline. And sure, I tried. There were times when I thought I was doing everything right, but it just never seemed to stick. And then there was the money side of things. You can't deny that's part of it. We all want to feel secure, right? Not just in love, but in life. I mean, a little extra cash never hurt anyone. At least, that's what I told myself. I used to think, if I could just find the right opportunity, the right business idea, maybe I could finally make it. But it always felt like I was just one step behind the people who actually had it together. That's when I met her, Emma. At first, it felt like everything had finally come together. She was smart, ambitious, fun. Everything I wasn't but wished I could be. And for the first time in a long time, I started to think, maybe this is it. Maybe this is my shot at everything I've wanted. I told myself, if I could just make this work, if we could build something together, then maybe, just maybe, I could finally prove to myself that I could make it, too. Love and success, they felt like they were within reach for the first time in ages. But as much as I wanted to believe it, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was about to shift. It never felt completely solid, you know? Like there was this quiet voice in the back of my head saying, this could all fall apart just as quickly as it started. But I ignored it. I had to. Because for the first time, I felt like I had a chance. And that feeling, well, that kept me going. The first time I met Emma, it felt like something clicked. You know that feeling? When you meet someone and for some reason, everything just feels right? Like, all of a sudden, the pieces fall into place. It wasn't just her beauty, though, yeah, she was stunning. It was the way she carried herself, the energy she had. There was this confidence about her, a kind of ambition that made you feel like anything was possible when you were around her. And maybe that's what I was missing in my life, that belief that things could be different. We met at a business conference, one of those events where you don't expect to find anything meaningful. Just another networking thing. But when we started talking, it felt different. She had this way of making you feel like you mattered, even if you were just a guy in the crowd. I don't know how it happened, but by the end of the night, we were laughing, exchanging numbers, and making plans to meet up again. It felt easy. Like no effort at all. And that was a new feeling for me. Things didn't usually come this naturally. I remember going home that night and thinking, maybe this is it. Maybe this is the start of everything I've been looking for. I spent the whole evening replaying our conversation in my head, picturing what could happen next. She seemed so different from the women I'd dated in the past. She wasn't looking for someone to take care of her. She had her own life, her own path. She was independent, confident, and driven. Everything I admired but felt I was lacking. And let's be honest, there was also this rush of excitement, the kind that comes with something new, something fresh. It had been a long time since I felt that spark, that possibility that maybe, just maybe, this could lead to something bigger. I liked that feeling. It made me feel young again, like the best days were still ahead of me. Our first few dates were perfect. We'd meet up at a little cafe, walk around the city, talk for hours. I was amazed at how easy it was to talk to her. It didn't matter what we were talking about, work, life, travel, the future. She was so open, so engaging. I couldn't help but admire her. She had this way of making everything seem exciting, like life was this grand adventure that we could dive into together. The chemistry was undeniable. I started to think, maybe I could be the man she needs. Maybe I could finally have it all, the career, the love, the security. Emma made me believe in the possibility of success again, in a way that I hadn't for a long time. Maybe this was the turning point in my life. Maybe I had finally found the missing piece. But even as I started to feel that hope again, I couldn't quite shake the nagging feeling that maybe I was trying too hard to make this work. I mean, who was I kidding? I was still dealing with my own issues, my own insecurities. and she was, well, Emma. This dynamic, confident woman who seemed like she had it all figured out. Still, I pushed those thoughts aside. This was my shot, right? I wasn't going to let my doubts get in the way of something that felt so right. For the next few months, everything felt like a dream. I was on cloud 9. Every time I saw Emma, it was like the world just disappeared, and all that mattered was the two of us. We spent weekends traveling, exploring new places, meeting new people, living a life I'd always dreamed of. She was spontaneous and full of energy, always pushing me to do things I wouldn't have done on my own. And for the first time in years, I felt like I was truly alive. It was effortless. She dragged me out of my comfort zone, make me try new things, skydiving, cooking classes, hiking to places I'd never even thought of visiting. I had a blast. I didn't think twice about the fact that my life was a bit more ordinary. I was living in the moment, and she was like this burst of light that made everything exciting. I thought, this is it. This is what love is supposed to feel like. The chemistry was electric, and I felt like we were on the same wavelength. Conversations flowed easily, and every day brought something new. It felt like we were building a future together, even though either of us had said anything concrete about it yet. There was something magical about the way she looked at me, as if she believed in me in ways I'd stopped believing in myself. She made me feel like I could be that guy, the one who had it all together. I found myself thinking, maybe I could really turn this around. Maybe this relationship is the answer I've been looking for. But as much as I wanted to dive headfirst into this fantasy, there were moments when I caught myself hesitating. It wasn't obvious, just little things, almost imperceptible. I started noticing that Emma was always pushing the limits, always looking for the next adventure, the next thrill. I wasn't sure I could keep up with that. I mean, I wasn't unadventurous. I enjoyed a good trip or a night out, but it was exhausting. She had this need for constant movement, a desire to never sit still. And as much as I admired her energy, it was starting to wear me down. I tried to match her enthusiasm, to be the guy who went along with every new plan, every spontaneous trip. But the truth was, I was more of a settle-in kind of guy. I liked routine. I liked having a plan, even if it wasn't exciting. But with Emma, there was no room for slowing down. It was always about pushing forward, trying something new, testing limits. I began to wonder if I was the right person for her. She was vibrant, full of life, and always on the go, while I felt like I was just trying to keep up. She needed someone who could match her pace, who was always ready for the next adventure. And for a moment, I started questioning if I was enough for her. Was I the kind of man she needed, or was I just along for the ride, a passenger in her world? But then, every time she smiled at me, every time we shared a laugh or a quiet moment, I pushed those thoughts aside. It was easy to forget about my doubts when I was with her. After all, who was I to question a feeling that felt so right? It wasn't long before I started noticing the cracks. They were small at first, just little things, things I could easily brush off. But over time, they started to add up. We'd argue over the tiniest stuff, silly things, like what to have for dinner or how to spend the weekend. It wasn't that we didn't get along, it was more like we were starting to rub up against each other in ways I hadn't expected. I'd never really considered how different we were in the long run. Emma was all about living in the moment, pushing herself to the edge, never stopping. I, on the other hand, found comfort in routine. I liked my space, I liked a certain stability. The constant whirlwind of her life started to feel like too much for me. I was tired, and I started to feel like I was being pulled in different directions. Her world was moving at one pace, and I was trying to keep up at mine. The hardest part was realizing that maybe we were both trying to force something that wasn't really there. It wasn't that we didn't care for each other, or that we didn't have chemistry. We did. But somewhere along the way, I started to wonder if I was the right person for her. And to be honest, I wasn't sure if she was the right person for me anymore either. Emma was driven, determined. She had big goals, big dreams. She wasn't afraid to go after them. And I admired that, more than I can say. But I also started to feel this pressure. Like I had to keep up. Like I wasn't enough as I was. She'd talk about her career, her projects, her vision for the future, and I'd nod along, but inside, I couldn't help but wonder, am I just not ambitious enough? We'd have late-night conversations where I'd try to share my doubts, my fears. But more often than not, Emma didn't seem to understand where I was coming from. She'd listen, of course, but then she'd push me. You need to step up, she'd say. You have so much potential, Jack. You can't let fear hold you back. And I wanted to believe her. I really did. But there were times when her words felt more like pressure than encouragement. I couldn't shake the feeling that she saw me as a project, someone she needed to help fix, not just love. That maybe, deep down, she didn't fully accept me for who I was, but rather for who she thought I could become. At first, I tried to ignore it. I thought it was just a phase. But the longer it went on, the more I felt like I was losing myself in this relationship. I wasn't sure where I ended and where she began. And that feeling, it's like it slowly started to creep into every part of my life. Work, family, even friendships. I was losing my sense of who I was, and the more I tried to hold on to the man I used to be, the more I felt like I was slipping away. It all came to a head one evening. We had one of those heated arguments, the kind where you both say things you don't mean but can't take back. She was frustrated with me, and I was frustrated with her. We were both pushing too hard, too much pressure, too many expectations, and it all just exploded. I remember her looking at me, eyes wide, almost as if seeing me for the first time. Jack, I don't think you're the person I need you to be, she said. And in that moment, I realized something. Maybe I wasn't the person she needed me to be. But also, maybe I wasn't the person I needed me to be either. That night, I realized I had been trying to live up to an image of myself I didn't even recognize anymore. I thought I had to be someone I wasn't to make this work, and somewhere along the way, I lost sight of who I really was. The hardest part wasn't the argument, it was the truth in her words. I wasn't just losing Emma, I was losing myself. I don't know how long we sat in silence after that. Maybe it was only a few minutes, but it felt like hours. I knew what I had to do, but I didn't want to. I loved Emma, still do in a way, but I knew this wasn't working. We were both trying so hard to make something fit that just didn't. I took a deep breath and said it. Maybe we need to take a step back. Maybe we need to end this. She didn't say anything at first, just looked at me. Then, after what felt like an eternity, she nodded. I think you're right, she said quietly. But I'm scared, Jack. And I was too. But I also knew we were both scared of becoming someone we weren't. I couldn't keep pretending, and I couldn't let her keep trying to fix me. It wasn't fair to either of us. We ended it that night. It wasn't dramatic, no shouting or throwing things. It was just over. I remember walking away, feeling like I'd lost everything and nothing all at once. The days after the breakup were rough. I thought I'd feel relieved, but instead, I just felt empty. It was like I'd been holding my breath for months and finally exhaled, but all that came out was regret. I spent a lot of time reflecting, thinking about what went wrong, what I could have done differently. I realized something, though. The pressure I'd felt, the need to change who I was to fit into her world, it wasn't just about Emma. It was about me. I had spent so much time focusing on fixing my life, fixing my relationship, that I forgot to fix myself. I had stopped listening to my own needs, my own desires. I had convinced myself that love would solve everything, but in the end, it was about me learning to accept who I was, flaws and all, and that's when it hit me. The real lesson was learning that I didn't need to be someone else to be loved. I needed to love myself first. I had spent so many years chasing the idea of success, of the perfect life, that I forgot what it meant to truly be at peace with who I was right now. I wasn't perfect. I didn't have it all figured out. But that was okay. I didn't have to be everything to everyone. I just needed to be enough for myself. It's been a while since Emma and I ended things, and honestly, it took a long time for me to come to terms with it. But looking back now, I'm grateful for that time we spent together. It taught me a lot. Most importantly, it taught me that love, real love, isn't about trying to fit into someone else's life or image. It's about finding someone who accepts you for who you are, flaws and all. And maybe more than anything, it taught me that before you can truly love someone else, you need to love yourself. Not just in the self-care way, but in the way that says, I'm enough as I am. I don't need to change who I am to be worthy of love or success. The right relationship doesn't come from a place of fixing each other. It comes from a place of understanding, acceptance, and mutual growth. As for me, I'm doing better now. I've found some peace. I've started to work on the things that matter to me, not because I'm trying to impress anyone or fill some kind of void, but because I want to. I've set some new goals, ones that are true to who I am. I've learned to let go of the pressure to have it all, and just focus on building a life that feels right for me. I don't know what the future holds, but I do know this: I'm okay with where I am. I'm okay with who I am. And for the first time in a long time, I feel like I'm finally living my own life, on my own terms.